It's hard to beat a good book, and there's some great literature around. The ones I like, though, are where the heroes are trying to overcome incredible barriers, all against the odds. And there's lots of great books like that, like Lord of the Rings, where Frodo is trying to cross Mordor to save the world, and Gandalf crossed the bridge of Khazad-dûm. Or maybe something a little bit different from Dickens, with characters like Oliver Twist and others like Ebenezer Scrooge. And their barriers, though, are different. Their challenges are different. What they're trying to overcome often is poverty, exploitation, injustice, hard-heartedness. And even though sometimes these great novels have got very different storylines and imagery, the heroes usually win out in the same way, through truth and love and sacrifice. There's always those three things. I know sometimes it might seem like with COVID that we're living in a novel, but at least we know, thank God, the vaccine is on the horizon. But actually, there are many dangers that we face, arguably some that are worse. And those dangers, though, as we well know, are often self-made. Maybe, like the couple where one or both are not speaking to each other. That might not seem like a big thing, but when you're in it, that silence can seem like an impenetrable barrier. So here maybe are two things that I think perhaps are worse than COVID. One is family breakdown. And by breakdown, I mean a division into part of something that belongs together. And we all know that at the heart of family is that sense of belonging. And we also know from our experience, either from within or looking on from outside, that family breakdown is intensely painful and destructive. It's not just we who depend for happiness on the family, but actually the whole of society is based on families. Think the damages we see in children sometimes when families break down, but also too with older people who can be abandoned and the pain that lies there. The thing is, I think we also know that great families are built on sacrifice. We often are doing funerals here all the time, and you hear of great parents and grandparents and people giving eulogies about them, talking about the amazing sacrifices they made. But all members of a family, for it to work, have to be prepared to sacrifice. And if one doesn't, that begins the disintegration of family life. I think that's something, though, that in our lives we need to highlight, that notion of sacrifice. And there's no better time to do it, I believe, than in Advent, where the whole story of Advent is about Joseph making sacrifices, and of course Mary, but also John the Baptist, and of course God, giving his son to us, sacrificing him. Sacrifice needs to be celebrated and practiced. And when we look at our lives every day to some degree, we depend on someone making sacrifices for us. The second thing I think that is a real danger, and that is spiritual breakdown. Again, a division into parts of something that belongs together. And the truth is that we belong to God. He made us out of nothing. Or in the words of Isaiah in that first reading today, we are the clay, you are the potter, the work of your hands. Yet many of us live our lives as though we are self-made men and women. And that's not the truth. Arguably, losing touch with God is the single most dangerous thing we can do in our lives. It means we become disconnected not just from God, but from the family of God, from his disciples. And we miss out on all the graces and enrichment which St. Paul speaks of in that first reading to the Corinthians. In addition, we lose sight of God's purpose for us, his divine plan that will bring us wholeness. Isaiah wrote beautifully in that first reading, speaking to God, and says that, "Oh, that you would tear the heavens open and come down. At your presence, the nations would melt." Well, as we know, God has come down. The mountains didn't melt, but it was not mountains that he wanted to soften or move. But as we know, sometimes we're not so easily moved. We too, like in all our relationships, the same with God, we can put up an impenetrable barrier. And God won't break that. That's where our free will lies. It's for us to open up. The gospel tries to persuade us to do so in words like waking up, not being distracted, being ready. God is here. He's ready for us. The question is, in Advent, are we ready for him? And the only way we can do that is by being aware of his presence. Prayer is the only way, and we can't hope to be ready without time spent in prayer. Having Jesus in that way in the center of our lives will remind us that in all the best stories, like all the best stories, we're being rescued in a way that is only through truth and love and sacrifice. His mostly, but ours too. And if we put those three words at the center of our Advent journey, this COVID Christmas might surprise us.